Well, I was born in 1943, Robert Allen Slater, and I was always Robert until I went to Duntroon, the military college, and I was called Bob from then on. I was raised in Sydney, born during the war when my father was in active service. I went to Sydney Boys High, and from there went to Duntroon in 1960 as a 16-year-old. Graduated then into engineers. Then I served for 22 years in the regular army in the Royal Australian Engineers, including in Vietnam, May 68 to May 69, with 17 Construction Squadron. I ended my regular army service as a Lieutenant Colonel, as Chief Engineer for the Army in Western Australia. And I retired from the regular army then, came to Melbourne and transferred to the reserve. I became the commanding officer of 22nd Construction Regiment. Then I was commanding officer of Monash University Regiment, then promoted to colonel, and I commanded the engineers in the Southern region, which included, at that time, Victoria, South Australia and Tasmania. Then I was the chief instructor of the Reserve Commander Staff College, and then I was promoted to brigadier and commanded the 3rd Training Group, which trained all reserve soldiers and officers in Victoria. And I retired in 1996. I became the Honorary Colonel Commandant of Engineers in 2002, and I held that position for 7 years. That's an honorary position, but it's like a father or grandfather figure to the Corps, and the role there is to maintain the customs of the service within Victoria, plus also be a go-to person for all the commanding officers of engineers who often have a loneliness of command. So somebody who's been through the mill, they can go to and get advice. And I think it's a thing that could really work well in so many other parts of the community. Like in teachers, if there was somewhere a headmaster or headmistress could go to, somebody who's been through the service to a senior level without any sort of command responsibilities or authority, they can just let out all their thoughts and get advice which they may or may not have to listen to, but at least give them some ideas that they can work on.
Oh, that's excellent. I think being able to at least give people options and ideas outside of what they're thinking. And so what was one of the things that stood out when you were giving officers advice? What's one of the things that you'd like to share regarding some of the advice that you've given, not only to officers, but even others that you think would be really worthwhile sharing today?
Right, as far as giving advice to officers in particular, one of the things that I learned along the way when I attended our Army Staff College, which in those days was at Queenscliff, a bit like the Army's version of an MBA. We had an excellent commandant, a brigadier, who used to get speakers to come and talk. And he also held little forums on things that he reckoned would be very useful as you went through life. Because the Staff College was that in-between where you'd had regimental life, and all of us on the course had come from different regimental backgrounds, so we knew our own core strengths and the way our corps worked. And we mixed with people who had the same knowledge of different corps and different countries as well. And we all pooled our knowledge, preparing us for going to what was called staff, that is into higher level management, planning operations and logistics, across the Army's breadth. So that was experience that was invaluable. Also, I did a 12-month course in England on equipment for procurement and management. So I went through all the different types of equipment the Army had, looking to see the characteristics of what the Army had, and trying to project a future warfare, what new capabilities we'd look for, and how we go about developing it. So with that sort of background, you're able to give advice to officers and soldiers on a whole range of things, from operational thinking and personnel management, and the importance of looking after people, which is the backbone of the services. Without people, you've got no services. And also the equipment side of things.
So did you help engineer some of the changes in some of the equipment to be able to, what the future needs might be? Okay.
Well, before I went over to Perth as Chief Engineer in the late 70s, as a Lieutenant Colonel, I was in what's called Material Branch, which at Army Headquarters looks after equipment development. And I had the role of plant, marine and aviation, which was all our earth-moving equipment, which we had to replace. All our stuff that we used in Vietnam was getting very old. Warehousing equipment and marine equipment, from workboats to diving gear, diving equipment and recompression chambers, and aircraft. We were bringing the Nomad in, but also parachutes. So from parachutes and diving gear, I had to work very closely with the SAS, because the SAS used to, when they saw something on a shelf, they wanted it now. That was always a challenge, because the Army system was a 5-year plan, and you had to look out ahead. You couldn't just buy things as you saw it. So SAS were quite a challenge. So that was a very interesting posting, and I was involved in getting in new parachutes into the Army, ones that were more manoeuvrable, and also a lot of earth-moving equipment, from front-end loaders, graders, bulldozers, warehousing equipment for all the static warehousing needs we had. The workboat was being brought in, the Navy was actually managing it, and had a lot of problems. So that was all pretty exciting. During that time too, I had a project in Malaysia where we supplied the Malaysian Gurkhas, who were their SAS equivalent, with diving gear, recompression gear, parachutes and parachute test equipment, and also to set up a logistics system, because they weren't in a position where they knew how to maintain what were very highly technical bits of equipment. So that was a very exciting time.
So during that time, that was after you'd served in Vietnam?
After, yes.
So you spent 22 years in the services.
Yes.
So the most exciting time was the things you've just mentioned then?
They were part of certainly very challenging times.
So right through your whole of being part of the Defence Forces, there was constantly challenges and ways that you could progress with
Yes.
helping with the system.
Yes.
And that would have been quite rewarding, I would think.
Very much.
Excellent.
The way the Army worked, if you got to Duntroon, they expected that you were capable of getting to Major. And promotion to Major, as long as you passed your promotion exams and courses, they put you into different jobs that gave you a good broad perspective of how the Army worked in your corps. So I was in, after Duntroon, I spent some time as a staff officer in a reserve unit. I went to university and completed an engineering degree in civil engineering. Then I went to the holding squadron before going to Vietnam.